Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Hayes and I'll be your professor for this online course of Victimology. And so this video will walk you through the syllabus and hopefully address any questions you might have about the structure of the course. So to begin, on the top of the syllabus you can see my office location listed as well as my office telephone number. However, the best way to get into contact with me is my email address, which is listed right there on the syllabus. A little bit further down, on the first page, you can see the textbooks that are required for this course. And so the Daigle is going to be your core textbook that we'll use throughout the entire semester. You'll then also see 4 other memoirs listed that will be used to complement the topics that we're going to go over within the Daigle textbook itself. So for instance, Crazy Love by Leslie Steiner will go through her experience as a victim of intimate partner violence, and we'll use that to connect all the pieces together. In addition, for some topics, I'll post extra readings on Blackboard that will give you a little bit more detail and unpack some of these concepts a little bit further. A little bit further down then, on the bottom of the first page, is a discussion of what victimology actually is. And so for many of your criminal justice classes, we focus very much on the offender. However, if you're a police officer, when you respond to the scene of a crime, the victim is most often going to be there. If you're a prosecutor, you might need the victim to testify, or if you're a correctional officer, oftentimes, as we'll learn, the victim and offender know each other in some capacity. And so if the offender is having visitors, there's a good chance that individual might have been victimized. So throughout many parts of the system, the victims and offenders interact with criminal justice personnel. I also want to take this time to go over the sensitive nature of the course. As we'll discuss, about 1 in 4 women will be victimized at some point in their life, which suggests that there's a good chance that either someone in this course or someone that you may know might have had an experience that had been troubling or emotional. And so within the syllabus, I provide resources in terms of the SHSU Counseling Center, but also national hotlines as well. This is really important because of Title IX. I am a mandated reporter. So if there's any disclosure of sexual assault or IPV within your response papers, I'm going to have to refer it to the Title IX office. Okay. A little bit further down then, we walk through the course objectives. And so first up, we really want to gain an understanding of the key terms. Within the field of victimology, there's certain phrases that if I say routine activities theory, you should know exactly what that means. And so it's really important within that first section of the course, we work through these key terms and these theories that we'll then take and apply to the different concrete topics later on within the course. Second, we want to learn those fundamental theories, and that's something that we're going to do in Chapter 2 right before your first exam. We also want to take then these theories and these key terms and apply them to the experience of victims. So for instance, as you guys will start to learn, routine activities theory can be applied to basically everything. And so we'll use it to understand child abuse, we'll use it to understand intimate partner violence, we'll use it to understand school and work-based victimization, which are 3 very different things. However, the theory can be used to explain all 3. And then lastly, we want to critically evaluate this. So just because I can take routine activities theory and apply it to, say, sexual assault, does that make the most sense within that case? So we're going to take these applications and then really think through, is this the application that we want to do? When we get to the course requirements then, it's going to be set up so that you have 4 exams and 4 response papers. The exams will be standard multiple choice true-false questions, so 50 questions. You'll have an hour and 20 minutes to complete them. They'll be presented one at a time, and you won't be able to backtrack within the questions. Okay, so you have about a minute a question for this exam. You'll also be required to use the lockdown browser, and so as we get closer to that first exam, I will send out detailed information of where to download it and what happens if there's an issue when you're taking the exam. As you'll see in the back of the syllabus, and we'll go through that in just a little bit, you have a week to complete both the response papers and the exams. All the exams are due by Friday at 11:59 p.m. and so it's really important that you plan accordingly when taking your exams. If you're worried about your internet dropping out or lockdown crashing or any of those sorts of issues that happen when taking an exam online, you want to make sure you're not waiting until 11 o'clock on Friday night, right? I'm really timely in trying to respond to emails. However, I'm usually sleeping by that point in time. And so I'm not going to be able to reopen and reset the exam. So it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, that if you are really concerned about these technical issues, and you should be, right, to get those exams completed by Thursday the latest to make sure that there's no hiccups with the system. You'll also then have 4 response papers that are tied to the sections that we've gone over. The response papers are about 1 to 2 pages, so it's got to be a minimum onto the second page that connects the readings back to some of the topics that we've been going over. What's really important about these response papers, though, is that they're based in the evidence. Okay, what do we mean by that? One way we can make sure that it's not an opinion-based response paper is that we don't use I, you, we, me within your response. Okay, so for instance, if the response paper was on why doesn't a victim report, you could say a victim doesn't report for X and Y and Z reasons instead of saying I think a victim doesn't report. Okay, and you'll have a detailed rubric of how those response papers will be graded when they're posted at that time. On the bottom of the second page then, you'll see the dates that the exams are due, the dates the response papers are due, and that each exam is worth 20% of your overall grade, and that the 4 reflection papers or response papers, the average will be worth 20% of your grade. So it's a weighted average at the end of the semester. It's also really important that you keep track of your progress throughout the semester. So oftentimes in April, I get a panicked email of what can I do to improve my grade? And by then it's often too late. You've already had 3 exams, you've already had 3 response papers, and so it's really hard to kind of dig yourself out of the hole at that point. So if on your first exam you're not doing as well as you hoped or as you think you should have done, that's the point to reach out to me, to reach out on the online discussion board, to figure out ways and strategies to improve your study habits, right? This course is entirely self-paced, and so I have no idea how long you're spending on the PowerPoints, if you're reading before looking at the PowerPoints, if you're taking your own notes in conjunction with the PowerPoints. So there's many tools and techniques that we can do to improve that grade. So you really want to think back and self-reflect, okay, what did I do for this exam that prepared me or didn't prepare me, and how can I improve that for the second or third exam? In addition, if you send me a panicked email at the end of the semester, I really need X and Y and Z grade, it's a form of grade bargaining and it can lead to an academic dishonesty claim. So you want to really make sure that you're being proactive about your grades. Okay, because as you can see, an 89.5 is an A. An 89.4 is a B. I don't round up an 89.4 because as you'll start to see, the reflection papers, if you put the time in, you put the effort in, should really be a nice boost for your overall grade. So that 89.4 is always kind of a little inflated, and so to round it up would be even more of an inflation. So make sure you're keeping progress and track of your grades throughout the semester. Next up, makeup exams. Unless there's medical documentation submitted before the exam deadline, I cannot give a makeup exam, right? So plan accordingly. You have a week to complete the exams and the response papers, and so without that documentation, I cannot reopen the exam after the deadline has closed. In terms of the attendance policy, this is an entirely self-paced course, and so different units will open up each week. However, that week of the exam and the response paper, that's when the assignments are due. Okay, so if you don't submit it by that point, or you're waiting till the last minute to cram all 4 weeks into 1 week of studying and taking the exams, you're not going to do well in the course, right? Going to the information a little bit each and every day will lead to a better overall grade and a better overall experience for yourself in this course as well. Moving next to academic honesty, this really focuses on plagiarism and cheating, especially within the response papers. So your response papers will go through the Turnitin system, which will cross-check with internet and electronic sources and paper sources and all that stuff, but it also checks against other assignments you might have submitted for other courses. And so self-plagiarism is when you take an assignment you wrote for one course and you try to use it in another course, right? You're trying to get credit for one thing, right? You only wrote one paper, but you're trying to use it in two things. That's a form of plagiarism. And so it will result in a failing grade, and it could result in failure of the course, right? A number of students had that issue last semester, and so you want to make sure that you're working on the assignment as a completely separate assignment from another course you might be taking. If you have any questions about plagiarism or citations or any of that, I am more than happy to help, or you can contact the SHSU library, and they're totally happy to help you find articles, to help you with citations and APA format, and all of that good stuff. Next up is the disabled student policy. If you need extra time and you have that documentation, just send it over and I'll make those accommodations as well. In terms of religious holy day, if the exam falls within that time frame, you just have to give me the documentation before then. In terms of telephones and text messages, doesn't really apply to an online course, so we can move up next to email correspondence. Right? I teach over 200 students a semester in 2 different sections, and so it's really important that you address the email so that I know you're from the online course, but also that it's a formal email, right? At some point you'll be on the job market and you'll be sending your resume, so it's just a really good habit to develop at this point in time. So you want to start the email with, "Dear Dr. Hayes," right? It's Dr. Hayes. Mrs. Hayes is my mom, so you don't want to start it with Mrs. Hayes because I'll be like, oh. So, "Dear Dr. Hayes," type out your question and make sure you sign the email as well. Your same email is kind of a mix of numbers and letters, so I have no idea who is sending that information, right? If you don't provide your name, provide that you're in the online course, there's a good chance I might not write back to the email because I don't know who it's coming from. Second, I do my best to respond to emails in a timely manner, usually within 24 hours, but usually within a couple hours. That being said, you're much more likely to get a response during normal business hours, so like 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., than outside that time frame, right? The course is self-paced. You can do the lectures at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, you can take the exam at 5 a.m. However, I'm usually sleeping then, right? So just plan around that. I do my best, try to be quick, but if it's during those off-peak hours, you might not get a response right away. And then lastly, in terms of course conduct, this is a really sensitive and often difficult course for a lot of students. And so that I just ask that you respect your classmates, respect one another. If at some point the material becomes challenging or overwhelming, make sure you take a few minutes, go for a walk, do some exercise, and then come back to it, right? Sometimes if we're sitting with this information for 2 or 3 hours, it becomes really heavy and really difficult to process. And so just make sure you're taking care of that and yourself when you're working through this material. On the last page of the syllabus then, you'll see a breakout of the different topics and the weeks in which we'll be going over this information. And so this week, you'll have from Wednesday until next Friday to go over chapters 1 and then the end of chapter 2. Okay, so that information will be available. The PowerPoints are there. Videos associated with these topics are also posted within those folders as well. On midnight, on January 27th, the next week will become available. So Chapter 5 will become available. So you can work through the information on victims' rights and remedies within that week. The following week, Chapter 3 will become available. So it goes over the consequences of victimization. And then the following week, the theories chapter will become available. At the end of those 4 sections, you'll then have a week where your exam and that first response paper becomes available to you. So they'll be open the entire week. So if you want to take it that first day, you can totally do that, and then you're done for the week. Or you can take one day, take the time to work through and really edit and proofread that response paper, but you have until Friday at 11:59 p.m. to submit them. Always remember, Blackboard crashes when you least want it to, and so just plan around that. After that first block then, we're going to move into the specific topics. So while the final exams are not cumulative per se, they are really based on those key terms and those key concepts that we go over within that first section. So if you don't do too well on that first exam, it is so important that you go back and review that information so that you're well prepared for the back end of the semester. So towards the end of February 24th, we'll move into child maltreatment and elder abuse, and that's when the Perry, and I can never say the second name, but The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, you'll be reading that and connecting it to the course material. This one's a little bit different. It's a heavy book, it's very science, and if I assign the whole thing, I don't think anyone would be too happy about it. It's a difficult book to read. Okay, so you'll be reading Chapter 1, Chapter 3, which is very Texas focused, and a lot of students typically like that, and then pick one other chapter of your choice, right? So you can start to see the themes across the different chapters. The next week then, we'll move into intimate partner violence, and that's when we'll be reading Crazy Love, right? So it's a lot of reading kind of crammed in those 2 weeks, so I really encourage you to start reading Crazy Love before the first exam, right? Spread it out over time. You can also do audiobooks for these as well. For Lucky, the book on sexual assault, I did an audio book for that, and it's really interesting. You can get a free one. You can do it when you're at the gym or when you're in the car to really kind of take advantage of the different media forms that are out there. We'll then move into spring break, right? So it's a lot of reading within those 2 weeks. We'll have a spring break, and then we'll come back from spring break, and your second exam and your second response paper will become available on March 17th. We'll then, after spring break and that second exam, move into sexual assault. I have some great documentary recommendations when we move into that chapter as well. We'll then go over hate crimes and terrorism. So there's a very lengthy, an hour and a half, video on hate crimes that we'll be watching. We'll then have your third exam on those 2 topics, and then we'll wrap up the semester with human trafficking as well as school and work victimization. And then you'll have that expanded time to take your final exam and your final response paper, which will be a nice overview of the entire semester. So you'll pick 2 hours of crime-related TV. So it could be a documentary, it could be a TV show you're watching, it could be Dexter. Last semester, a lot of students watched Mindhunters. But whatever you choose, the question will focus on how are victims portrayed in it, and does it match up to what we've been talking about all semester, right? And we'll start to see how victims are portrayed in the media, and that it doesn't always reflect the victim experience, right? So I'm really looking forward to an exciting and engaging semester. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to email me. There's also a virtual office within the Blackboard as well. And so you can post questions there. And this will allow your classmates to see other questions that students have, to engage with one another. But it provides a different medium and a different form for you to get those questions answered. So if you have any questions, do feel free to email me, and I look forward to working with each of you. Have a good one.